What would you do if you discovered that your dream home was built on top of one of the most horrific crimes in American history? This is exactly what happened to the Morrison family when they purchased the historic Whitmore Mansion in Salem, Massachusetts. What they thought would be a simple renovation turned into the discovery of a secret that had been buried for over 120 years. In March 2024, construction workers renovating the mansion's ballroom made a discovery that would send shockwaves through the archaeological community and beyond. Hidden beneath the ornate marble floors lay a secret crypt, and inside that crypt was the perfectly preserved skeleton of a young woman dressed in an elaborate Victorian wedding gown. But this wasn't just any burial. The evidence suggested something far more sinister. The scratch marks on the stone walls, the splinter wood inside the coffin, and the positioning of the remains told a story of unimaginable horror. This woman had been buried alive. But who was she? How did she end up entombed beneath what was once Salem's most prestigious ballroom? And why, after 120 years, have residents and workers begun reporting paranormal activity that seems directly connected to this gruesome discovery? The answers to these questions reveal a tale of love, betrayal, and a revenge that transcends death itself. This is the true story of Eleanor Blackwood, the bride who disappeared on her wedding night in 1904, and the dark secret that powerful families will kill to protect. The Whitmore Mansion had stood as a monument to Salem's Gilded Age prosperity since 1898. Built by industrial magnate Thomas Whitmore, the three-story Victorian masterpiece had hosted some of New England's most elite social gatherings. But by 2024, the mansion had fallen into disrepair after decades of abandonment following the mysterious deaths of the last Whitmore descendants in the 1990s. When the Morrison family purchased the property, they knew they were taking on a massive restoration project. What they didn't expect was to uncover one of the most disturbing archaeological finds in Massachusetts history. It was March 15, 2024, when contractor Miguel Santos was removing the ballroom's damaged marble flooring. His jackhammer had been working through the subflooring when it suddenly broke through into empty space below. Initially thinking he had hit a utility tunnel or old basement extension, Miguel lowered a flashlight into the hole. What he saw made his blood run cold. Approximately 8 feet below the ballroom floor was a perfectly constructed stone chamber, about 6 feet long and 4 feet wide. Inside lay an ornate wooden coffin, and beside it, scattered across the stone floor, were the remnants of what appeared to be a Victorian-era wedding dress. But it was what Miguel saw when he lowered himself into the chamber that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The coffin lid had been splintered from the inside. Deep gouges marked the stone walls at hand height. And most disturbing of all, when the police forensics team carefully opened the damaged coffin, they found a complete skeleton positioned face down, with bone fragments embedded under what remained of the fingernails. Dr. Sarah Chun, the forensic anthropologist called to examine the remains, had seen many crime scenes in her 20-year career, but nothing like this. The evidence was unmistakable. This woman had been buried alive and had fought desperately to escape her stone tomb. Carbon dating confirmed what the Victorian dress and coffin construction had already suggested. These remains were from the early 1900s, but it was a discovery of a small silver locket clutched in the skeleton's right hand that provided the first clue to the victim's identity. Inside the locket was a photograph of a beautiful young woman with dark hair and kind eyes, and engraved on the back with the initials EB and a date, October 31st, 1904. A search through Salem's historical records revealed the shocking truth. Eleanor Blackwood, daughter of prominent textile merchant William Blackwood, had disappeared without a trace on October 31st, 1904, her wedding night. She was supposed to have married Thomas Whitmore, Jr., heir to the Whitmore industrial fortune, in what the Salem Evening News had called the wedding of the century. But according to historical accounts, Eleanor had mysteriously vanished during the reception, leaving behind only her wedding bouquet and shoes. The Whitmore family claimed she had run away with another man, bringing shame upon both families. A manhunt was organized, but Eleanor Blackwood was never seen again. Now, 120 years later, Her remains have been found entombed directly beneath the very ballroom where her wedding reception had taken place. The implications were staggering. Someone had built a secret crypt under the mansion's main ballroom, and Eleanor had been imprisoned there while her wedding guests danced and celebrated above her, completely unaware of the horror unfolding beneath their feet. But who would commit such an unspeakable act? And why had the truth been buried for so long? To understand the horror of Eleanor Blackwood's fate, we must first understand who she was and the world she lived in. Historical records paint a picture of a young woman who was far from the typical submissive bride of her era. Eleanor Blackwood was born in 1882 to William and Margaret Blackwood, a wealthy textile merchant family who had made their fortune during the Industrial Revolution. Unlike many women of her time, Eleanor was highly educated, having attended Radcliffe College, a rare privilege for women in the early 1900s. She was known for her intelligence, her strong opinions on women's rights, and her fierce independence. Those who knew Eleanor described her as beautiful but formidable. She stood nearly 6 feet tall, with striking dark hair and eyes that, according to contemporary accounts, seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. She was fluent in French and Latin, an accomplished pianist, and had once shocked Salem society by publicly defending the suffragette movement. The engagement between Eleanor and Thomas Whitmore, Jr. had been arranged by their families, as was common among wealthy New England dynasties. The union would merge two powerful fortunes and create one of the most influential industrial empires in Massachusetts. But from the beginning, the relationship was troubled. Thomas Whitmore, Jr., born in 1878, was a complete opposite of his bride-to-be. Where Eleanor was intellectual and progressive, Thomas was traditional and controlling. Historical accounts describe him as handsome but arrogant, with a reputation for gambling and associations with Salem's underground criminal elements. In the months leading up to the wedding, several concerning incidents were documented. Eleanor's personal maid, Mary O'Sullivan, wrote in her diary, discovered in the Salem Historical Society archives in 1987, that Eleanor had confided fears about Thomas's dark business dealings and his violent temper when contradicted. Most tellingly, Mary wrote on September 15, 1904, "Miss Eleanor came to me today with bruises upon her wrists." She says Mr. Thomas gripped her too hard when she questioned his associates. She is frightened, but the families have invested too much in this union. She feels trapped like a bird in a gilded cage. But Eleanor Blackwood was not a woman to remain trapped. In the weeks before her wedding, she had begun conducting her own investigation into Thomas's business dealings. What she discovered would ultimately cost her life. The wedding ceremony on October 31st, 1904, was held at Salem's First Congregational Church. Contemporary newspaper accounts described it as a lavish affair, with over 300 guests in attendance. Eleanor was described as radiant but pale, and Thomas as the picture of masculine pride. The ceremony proceeded without incident, and the newlyweds were transported by horse-drawn carriage to the Whitmore mansion for reception. But something went terribly wrong during those celebrations. According to witness statements given to police at the time, Eleanor was last seen around 10:30 p.m., speaking quietly with Thomas near the ballroom's main entrance. Guests noticed she appeared distressed, but assumed it was typical wedding night nerves. By 11 p.m., Eleanor had vanished. Her wedding bouquet was found abandoned on a table, her shoes discovered at the bottom of the mansion's main staircase. A frantic search of the grounds revealed no trace of the bride. What you've witnessed so far is just the beginning of one of the most disturbing crimes in American history. What do you think happened to Eleanor during those final moments at her reception? Do you believe she discovered something about Thomas that sealed her fate? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to know what theories you're forming about this case. The investigation into Eleanor's disappearance in 1904 was brief and, as we now know, deliberately misleading. The Whitmore family's influence over local law enforcement ensured that the case was quickly closed with the official explanation that Eleanor had eloped with another man. But modern forensic analysis of historical documents and the physical evidence found in the crypt reveals a much darker truth. In 2024, researchers gained access to previously sealed documents in the Whitmore family estate. What they found painted a terrifying picture of Thomas Whitmore Jr.'s true nature and the events leading up to Eleanor's murder. Thomas was deeply involved with a criminal organization that controlled illegal gambling, prostitution, and extortion throughout New England. The Whitmore industrial fortune, built on textile mills and shipping, served as a legitimate front for laundering money from these illegal operations. But by 1904, Thomas had become reckless, and several prominent families were beginning to investigate irregularities in their business dealings with the Whitmore empire. The most damning evidence came from a collection of letters hidden behind a false wall in the mansion study. These letters, written in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting, revealed that she had spent months secretly documenting Thomas's criminal activities. She had names, dates, financial records, and testimony from witnesses who had been victims of Whitmore extortion schemes. One letter, dated October 20th, 1904, just 11 days before her wedding, was addressed to her father but never sent. In it, Eleanor wrote, "Dearest Papa, I cannot in good conscience proceed with this marriage knowing what I know. Thomas is not just a criminal. He is dangerous. He has threatened violence against the Hendrickson family for their refusal to sell their mill to him at below-market prices. Yesterday, I overheard him discussing plans to burn down the Riverside Textile Company if they do not pay protection fees. I have documented everything, and after the wedding, I intend to take this evidence to the authorities. I pray I have the courage to do what is right, even if it means scandal for our family." But Eleanor never got the chance to expose Thomas's crimes. According to testimony from Dr. James Mitchell, the mansion staff physician in 1904, Eleanor had consulted him on October 29th about feeling increasingly unwell in Thomas's presence. Dr. Mitchell noted that Eleanor described symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning, fatigue, stomach pain, and a metallic taste in her mouth. Modern toxicology analysis of Eleanor's remains confirmed Dr. Mitchell's suspicions. Elevated levels of arsenic were found in her bones, indicating she had been slowly poisoned over a period of weeks. But the arsenic wasn't what killed her. It was used to weaken her, making her easier to control. The most horrifying discovery came from architectural analysis of the mansion itself. The secret crypt where Eleanor was found wasn't a hastily constructed grave. It was a purposefully built chamber that had been integrated into the mansion's foundation during its original construction in 1898. This meant the Whitmore family had been planning Eleanor's murder for years, possibly from the moment the engagement was announced. Blueprints found in the mansion's basement revealed that the crypt was designed with a ventilation system that could be sealed from above. The chamber was positioned directly beneath the ballroom center, ensuring that any sounds from below would be masked by the music and dancing above. It was a perfectly planned execution chamber, disguised as a tomb. But perhaps the most chilling evidence was a journal found in Thomas's private safe, written in his own hand. The entry, dated October 31st, 1904, read, "The deed is done. Eleanor discovered more than we anticipated, but she will never share her secrets now. Mother says the guest never suspected anything when we announced she had fled with that Irish stable boy. By the time anyone thinks to look for her body, we will all be long dead, and the Whitmore name will remain untarnished." The journal revealed that Thomas's mother, Victoria Whitmore, was not only aware of the plan, but had helped orchestrate it. Several other family members and trusted associates were involved in the conspiracy, including the mansion's head butler, who had drugged Eleanor's champagne during the reception. Thank you for staying with this video until now. We truly appreciate your time and attention to this story. We assure you that the best is yet to come, and what you'll discover in the next chapters will surprise you completely. Using forensic evidence, architectural analysis, and newly discovered documents, investigators have been able to reconstruct the terrifying event of Eleanor's final hours on October 31st, 1904. What emerges is a calculated execution carried out while over 300 wedding guests celebrate above, completely unaware of the horror unfolding beneath their feet. The evening began normally enough. Eleanor, despite her growing suspicions about Thomas, had decided to proceed with the wedding while secretly planning to expose his crimes afterward. She had hidden copies of her evidence in her childhood bedroom at the Blackwood estate, intending to retrieve them after the honeymoon. At approximately 9:45 p.m., during the reception's main dinner service, Eleanor was given a special champagne toast by Thomas's mother, Victoria Whitmore. Multiple witnesses recall Victoria making a point of personally serving Eleanor a crystal glass of champagne, claiming it was a special family tradition for welcoming new brides into the Whitmore lineage. Eleanor, not wanting to appear rude, accepted the drink despite her growing distrust of the family. What she didn't know was that the champagne had been laced with a combination of laudanum and chloral hydrate, drugs commonly available in 1904 that would cause drowsiness and disorientation without immediately raising suspicion. By 10:15 p.m., Eleanor was visibly struggling to maintain her composure. Several guests later told police they noticed the bride appearing flushed and unsteady, but attributed this to wedding day excitement and champagne. Eleanor's maid, Mary O'Sullivan, approached her mistress and offered to escort her to a private room to rest, but Thomas intervened, insisting he would care for his new wife personally. This was the last time Eleanor was seen alive by anyone outside the conspiracy. Thomas led Eleanor toward the mansion's main staircase, ostensibly to take her to their bridal suite on the second floor. However, security cameras installed during the 2024 renovation revealed something that had been hidden for 120 years. Behind a tapestry near the ballroom's east wall was a concealed door leading to a narrow spiral staircase, a passage that led directly to the secret crypt. Forensic analysis of the crypt revealed exactly what happened next. Eleanor, despite being drugged, realized something was wrong when Thomas led her down the hidden staircase instead of up to their room. Scratch marks on the stone walls show where she tried to resist, her fingernails scraping against the rough stone as Thomas and at least two other men, likely his cousins Richard and James Whitmore, forced her into the underground chamber. The crypt itself was a masterpiece of morbid engineering. The chamber was exactly the size of a large coffin, with stone walls that were nearly 2 feet thick to prevent any sound from escaping. The ventilation system had been designed with a manually operated valve that could seal the chamber completely from above. But here's where the evidence reveals the truly diabolical nature of the crime. Eleanor was not immediately sealed in the coffin. The forensic examination showed that she was alive and conscious when she was locked in the crypt, but the coffin lid was initially left open. This means she had time to fully understand her situation. She was trapped in an underground tomb while her wedding reception continued above her. The positioning of Eleanor's remains suggests she spent hours trying to escape. She clawed at the walls, searched desperately for any weak point in the stone construction, and eventually managed to climb onto the coffin itself to try to reach the chamber's ceiling. But the chamber had been built too well. There was no way out. The most heartbreaking evidence came from analysis of the wedding dress itself. Forensic textile experts found that Eleanor had torn strips from her dress and used them to try to stop up the ventilation holes, hoping to preserve what little air she had. She had also used her wedding ring to scratch a message into the stone wall. "Tell Papa the truth, E.B." Based on the evidence, investigators believe Eleanor survived for approximately 6 to 8 hours after being sealed in the crypt. During this time, the wedding reception continued above her. Guests danced, laughed, and celebrated while she fought for her life just feet below them. The ballroom's marble floor was thick enough that no sound from below could be heard, even if Eleanor had screamed. The final cruelty came when Eleanor, weakened by drugs and lack of air, was unable to prevent Thomas and his accomplices from closing the coffin lid and sealing it shut. The splinter we found inside the coffin shows that she continued fighting even after being enclosed, desperately trying to break free until her strength finally gave out. Meanwhile, above ground, Thomas had returned to the reception around midnight with an elaborate story. He claimed Eleanor had received an urgent message that her childhood friend was gravely ill in Boston. Despite his protests, he said Eleanor had insisted on leaving immediately to be with her friend. To explain her absence, Thomas showed guests a hastily written note, supposedly in Eleanor's handwriting, saying she would return in a few days. The deception worked perfectly. Guests were confused but accepted the explanation. The Blackwood family was notified, and a search was organized, but it focused on a route to Boston and Eleanor's known associates there. No one thought to search the mansion itself, especially not beneath the ballroom floor. By the time Eleanor's body was sealed in its stone tomb, the wedding reception was winding down. The last guests left around 2 a.m., completely unaware that they had been dancing on a grave. The discovery of Eleanor Blackwood's remains in 2024 was just the beginning. What happened next suggests that some injustices are too great for death to silence, and that Eleanor Blackwood may finally be getting the justice that was denied to her 120 years ago. The paranormal activity at the Whitmore mansion began almost immediately after Eleanor's body was discovered. Construction workers reported tools moving by themselves, cold spots that appeared suddenly in the ballroom, and the sound of a woman crying coming from the walls. But these incidents were just a prelude to something far more dramatic. On April 15, 2024, exactly 1 month after the discovery, the mansion experienced its first major supernatural event. Security cameras captured footage of the ballroom's restored chandeliers swinging violently despite no wind or seismic activity. More disturbing, the cameras also recorded what appeared to be the figure of a woman in a white dress standing in the exact spot where Eleanor's crypt had been found. But it was the fate of the surviving Whitmore descendants that truly suggested supernatural intervention. The Whitmore family line had continued through Thomas's brother Edward, who had not been involved in Eleanor's murder. Edward's descendants had maintained ownership of the mansion until the 1990s, when a series of tragic deaths forced them to sell the property. Here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Since Eleanor's body was discovered in 2024, 5 direct descendants of the Whitmore family have died under mysterious circumstances. All of these deaths occurred on October 31st, the anniversary of Eleanor's murder. All were members of families that had prospered from the Whitmore industrial fortune built on Thomas's criminal empire. The first death was Margaret Whitmore Harrison, great-great-granddaughter of Thomas's brother Edward. On October 31st, 2024, Margaret was found dead in her Boston apartment, apparently having suffocated in her sleep despite no apparent medical cause. The coroner's report noted that her apartment windows had somehow become sealed shut from the inside, and the ventilation system had mysteriously stopped working. The second death occurred exactly as investigators were preparing to exhume Eleanor's remains for proper burial. Jonathan Whitmore, a descendant living in New York, was found dead in his locked study on October 31st, 2024. The room's door was locked from the inside, the windows were sealed, and security footage showed no one entering or leaving. Like Margaret, Jonathan had apparently suffocated, despite being in perfect health. But perhaps the most disturbing incident involved the discovery of additional evidence hidden within the mansion itself. Workers renovating other areas of the house found more secret compartments containing documents that revealed the full extent of the Whitmore conspiracy. These documents showed that at least 12 people were involved in Eleanor's murder, including several prominent Salem families who had benefited from keeping the secret. Among these documents was a confession letter written by Thomas Whitmore Jr. himself, apparently composed shortly before his own death in 1932. In it he wrote, "The guilt has consumed me for 28 years. Eleanor's face haunts my dreams, and I hear her voice calling my name in every wind that blows through this cursed house. I pray that God will forgive me, but I fear that Eleanor never will. She was innocent of any wrongdoing, and we destroyed her for our own greed and fear." The letter went on to detail exactly how the murder was planned and executed, confirming every detail that forensic investigators had already determined. But the final paragraph was the most chilling. "I feel her presence growing stronger each year. Sometimes I see her standing at the foot of my bed, still wearing that blood-stained wedding dress. She never speaks, but her eyes promise that she will have her justice, even if she must wait 100 years to claim it." Thomas died the next day after writing this confession, found in his study with no apparent cause of death. His family, fearing the scandal that would result from the confession being made public, hid the document in a secret compartment where it remained until 2024. The supernatural activity at the mansion has continued to escalate. Visitors report seeing Eleanor's figure in the ballroom, particularly around the area where her crypt was discovered. She appears exactly as she did on her wedding night, a tall, beautiful woman in an elaborate white gown, but with dirt under her fingernails and an expression of determined anger. Most significantly, Eleanor's apparition has been seen visiting the homes of Whitmore descendants in the weeks before their deaths. Security cameras and witness testimonies confirm that a woman matching Eleanor's description has appeared at the residences of all 5 family members who have died since her body was discovered. The current whereabouts of Eleanor's remains add another layer to the mystery. After being examined by forensic investigators, her body was prepared for proper burial in Salem's Green Lawn Cemetery. However, on the morning of October 31st, 2024, the 120th anniversary of her murder, cemetery workers discovered that Eleanor's coffin was empty. The coffin had not been disturbed. The seals were intact, but the remains had completely vanished. Some believe Eleanor's spirit has finally found peace now that the truth about her murder has been revealed. Others suggest that her work is not yet finished, that she will continue seeking justice until every person who profited from her death and the subsequent cover-up has been held accountable. The Whitmore mansion remains empty today. The Morrison family, who discovered Eleanor's body, moved out immediately after the first paranormal incidents. The property is currently being investigated by the Salem Police Department as an active murder case, despite the fact that all the perpetrators died decades ago. But perhaps Eleanor Blackwood has found her own form of justice. The Whitmore industrial empire, built on her murder and maintained through 120 years of secrecy, has finally crumbled. The family's reputation lies in ruins. Their financial assets are tied up in legal proceedings, and their descendants live in fear of a ghostly bride who refuses to rest until her story is fully told. The story of Eleanor Blackwood forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, corruption, and the lengths that wealthy families will go to protect their secrets. For 120 years, the Whitmore family maintained their respectable facade, while Eleanor lay trapped beneath the very ballroom where she should have celebrated the happiest night of her life. But this case also demonstrates something more hopeful, that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to surface. Eleanor's intelligence and determination, which made her dangerous to the Whitmore conspiracy while she lived, ultimately ensured that her story will be told, even from beyond the grave. What do you think about Eleanor's apparent supernatural revenge? Do you believe justice can transcend death, or are these merely coincidences surrounding a tragic historical crime? Have you ever experienced anything that made you question the boundaries between life and death? Share your thoughts in the comments. We're fascinated to hear your perspectives on this extraordinary case. If stories of historical mysteries and supernatural justice captivate you like they do us, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss our most compelling investigations. Your support helps us continue uncovering these remarkable true stories that challenge everything we think we know about life, death, and justice. And don't miss our next video. Subscribe to the channel and enter the placelet and follow other stories so intriguing and frightening like this. Click on the screen to watch it now.